says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020, joining me to break down the upcoming round of action for the Parramatta Eels and also have a cheeky little look at Origin 2 is my good mate 60s. Big fella, morning after a big loss to the Queenslanders. Series gone, a lot of questions been answered, or levelled, to be answered by the Blues. How are you feeling on this particular Thursday morning?
You know what? I'm almost lost for words the morning after. There are things that happened in that game that some people might say, with the benefit of hindsight. No, there was no hindsight needed. We're talking about some of the dubious selections that happened with it, the inevitable injury to Tommy Turbo.
Oh, dear.
The post-match antics of Jerome Luai. It's just
The in-game antics of Jerome Luai.
Oh,
It's I think it's been billed as a disaster class on some of the media websites, and you can understand why. Absolutely shocking.
yes, yep.
So yeah, let's get towards the show there. But before we do, a quick shout out to the sponsors: Big Swing Golf, Northmead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan, and Parramatta, helping the tip sheet come out each and every episode. Love those guys, obviously 60s, but. Yeah, before we get into the Parramatta stuff, let's talk Origin, because there is a pretty big conversation to be had in the long term. But for us right now, could Freddie Fittler have made more incorrect decisions in terms of roster construction, in terms of the deployment of those players, in adverse conditions? We spoke about it with Clint. The balance of the bench was way off. They ended up playing Payne Haas for 80 minutes, didn't they? I think.
Yeah.
And the poor man looked like he was gassed out there, as you'd expect. And 67 minutes, there you go. You bring in Stefano Toicomano and give him 12 minutes, 60s. What's the point? I rate Stefano. I think he's an Origin level player. Give him at least 20, 25 minutes. But
BA uses a term when it comes to player performances that aren't up to scratch, where he doesn't get the commitment from the players that he wants, and he calls it dipping the toe in the water. Surely, if you're just going to play Stefano for 12 minutes, all you're doing is dipping the toe in the water. Like, it's not a...
And you don't... unless you're the Queensland team that won 8 in a row, you don't have that luxury. And even then, they didn't do that.
Yeah.
If you're picking a player because you think he's good enough, you play him.
Yeah, that's it. It. It's there were. And when did Cam Murray?
Like 50 something minute. It was crazy. Like one of your best players, and a player that should have been there from the second minute in terms of a replacement, because he's actually a replacement caliber center. He got left on to like the final 30 minutes. And the butterfly effects, the cascading series of catastrophic incidents that all stem from not replacing Tom Tebojevic when he injured his pec with someone like Cameron Murray, or a back rower even, someone that plays on the edges intrinsically in the past. That flowed on to the debutant Reece Robson, who started the game reasonably well, but fatigue really destroyed his ability to give Moses and Luai good service. There were a number of erratic passes that really left his halves to hang out there. Just baffling. I mean, you go into game 2 with an obvious, overt plan to use 2 dummy halves a la the way Queensland do, and yet you abandon that at the first possible opportunity and completely ditch your game plan. Like, what?
Yeah, I wrote on this in today's edition of Bumpers Up. And I said what you've just said then. If you lose a centre, most NRL coaches will shift a back rower into that position, because it's just defending just a tiny bit wider. They're used to being on the edge in both attack and defence. You've got a number of players in the NRL who have been, interchangeable at back row and centre. But, mate, moving a dummy half there. Oh, look, maybe there is one other coach out there that might put his bench dummy half out at centre. That'd be Todd Payton with Jake Granville, because he's played him.
Granville plays just about everywhere. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But I think you'd find there would surely be 16 other coaches out there who would not do what Brad Fittler did last night. And to do it in an Origin game when you're up against the elite of the Queensland players out there is just, it's mind-numbing. And the thing was, it was apparent very early on that Damien Cook was struggling. He looked lost. He looked lost when the ball was up in the air. He looked lost when the ball was on the ground. He looked lost when he was given overlaps.
He looked like a dummy half playing centre. Like, who would have thought? And
literally.
The juxtaposition between the mentality of New South Wales and Queensland across these last few, it's more than the last few years, but you remember the game where JT busted his shoulder very early into the contest and was clearly like a dead weight passenger out there, and New South Wales ran no traffic at him, and Andrew Johns was losing his mind in commentary going back years. Up against here where Queensland said, all right, you're going to play dummy half at centre, all our attack is going there. And the poor guy, I mean, Cook is a very good player. I wouldn't have necessarily picked him for Origin if everyone was fit, with Api Coruscant being my preferred dummy half. But in the context here, I honestly cannot fault him, because he was left not just to hang out to dry, he got absolutely rissoled out there by his coach. There are terms that I would use much stronger than that in a different context.
Which you did in your text messages.
Yes, I do believe that I sent you some very strongly worded text messages about what Fittler did to Cook in this particular game.
Yes, yeah. We are at very least a PG rated program here, mate. Do you know that when you have a PG movie, you get one swear for the entire movie? And Lord of the Rings was actually rated PG. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. They could have had one swear word in each movie. So I once saw a video where it was like, what's the best change of one sentence by adding a swear word you could make? And there was some stuff involving the Balrog and a few other things which were rather amusing. Well, mate, there was, as I indicated in the bumpers up today, there was no heating process in what you said that Fittler did.
Yes. What Fittler did to Cook was very raw. Let's just say that. Very raw.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we're laughing about it because it's almost in the realms of absurdity. It's almost as absurd as a certain journo's rating of Cook's performance last night. I mean, this is not an anti-Cook tirade at all that either of us are going on here, because he did not deserve to be put out there at centre in an Origin game. I mean, it's just not fathomable how that transpired. But for that journo to give him
7 out of 10.
Was it the highest rating?
I think it was the highest team rating. Yeah, equal highest team rating.
I mean, how many tries were scored through?
It screams to me of outrage baiting or fishing for a controversial response. So yeah, not a big fan of that. But speaking of controversial, I got some questions to ask 60s, because the complete lack of kick chase, the complete lack of hustle and short side plays, it really was close to sandbagging, in my opinion. The complete lack of effort surrounding what Mitchell Moses was doing really had me asking questions last night.
Well, I'll look at it from this perspective. With Queensland, everything is a complete buy-in. Every player buys into every other player that's selected in the team. They buy into the process. They buy into the match tactics. It's almost as if it's in the DNA of the players to understand what is required in Origin football. Now, I'm not suggesting that there was anything that was a conscious effort to not support teammates in the Blues camp at all. I'm not going to suggest that at all. But it's almost like some of the 1% plays.
The complete lack
exist.
of hustle on the short side play was that is inexcusable 60s at any level, whether it's Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup, NRL, let alone State of Origin. That was a try gone begging. Just like how there was a crossfield kick tip back to Luai that was fumbled. You know, the standards were very, very poor. It looked like they hadn't trained this week at all. And like I said, just the complete lack of hustle on kick chases and the short side stuff really has me. I know you weren't implying anything, but I don't know if I can say the same, because that felt like a sandbag.
I just thought that the team looked like, as it did in game one, a group of strangers who didn't understand the player next to them, who didn't understand the what was needed to win a game at this level. And although in the first game the Blues were leading until relatively late, you just knew what was coming from the Queenslanders. And for that to happen when, from memory, they were down with a player off the field, weren't they, with the sin bin in game one, when they staged their comeback. And it's, yeah, I just think there's a very simple answer in that they seem to understand at every part of the process in Origin what is required in Origin better than New South Wales. Now, you notice I'm not saying that New South Wales don't understand. I'm saying Queensland have a better understanding.
They've got the PhD instead of Origin. Yeah.
And that goes from team selections through to team preparation, through to the mental application during the game, the pushing their bodies through pain barriers. It's, you know, like the qualities that we associate with Origin football. How much of the folklore surrounds Queensland rather than New South Wales? Now, I'm obviously a Blues supporter, and I'm not, you know, I'm not as emotionally charged about last night as I would be if the New South Wales performance was an Eels performance, for example. But as a Blues supporter, I look back and I think, you know, so much of the folklore around Origin is around Queensland heroics, Queensland achievements, Queensland players. It's like, well, when Origin was created, it was created with Queensland in mind. Let's not get away from that. And as we found in discussions with players involved in Origin back then, that it took a while for New South Wales to actually, you know, catch on what this was about, to really, you know, in the embryonic stages of Origin, like, it was almost like New South Wales didn't treat it seriously. As John Muggleton informed us, you know, like city versus country involved Queensland players in the city team, in the New South Wales city team.
Yep.
So, and then, you know, you were getting matches with the same coach at Origin level, and players that are lining up for Queensland against New South Wales. Like, I mean, that was the early years, but it's an example that Origin was made for Queensland, and I just don't think we've ever really bridge that gap.
Except in the times where we've had a supreme difference in talent levels, where, you know, just the stars align and you have, you know, the team that got the three-peat and whatnot in the 2000s. In any time where there is a parity of competition or relative parity or they're slight underdogs even, Queensland just find another level. They
Well, look, how about we go back to the Super League era where Fatty Vorton coached them to the most insane upset series victory and just smashed New South Wales in that series. And if you want to talk about a disparity in talent in that year, like virtually all the big Queensland stars had gone to Super League and they still understood Origin football better than New South Wales at a time when New South Wales probably should have smashed them. Like, absolutely pulled their pants down. I mean, it was good for rugby league, in essence, that Queensland won that series. It was good for the ARL competition that Queensland won that series because it showed that it still had a supreme product where the result wasn't predictable. But, you know, like, and I know it's deeply historical compared to what has just transpired last night. But to me, I just think Queensland have a better understanding. And again, I'll repeat, I'm not saying New South Wales have no understanding because that would be an insult to the players that have all worn the blue jersey. I'm just saying I think Queensland have a better understanding about what Origin football means. And do you know what? Right at this point in time, I think it's an appropriate point to segue to an example of that, which was Jerome Luai's Instagram story today.
God.
Like,
clueless.
If people haven't seen it, it's still there right now at 10:15 a.m. this morning. You would have thought that someone would have got in his ear and said, mate, get rid of it. But for anyone that hasn't seen what it looks like, it's a photo of him sitting on the field, leaning up against the goalpost, black and white. Chill, all you idiots have work tomorrow morning, laughing emojis. Now, whether it's directed at Queensland supporters, whether it's directed at New South Wales supporters who were critical of his performance, what does it say about his regard for the people who provide his livelihood, which is the punters out there who go to the games, the ones that watch on television that allow for big media deals to be done? Chill, all you idiots have work tomorrow morning. Like, you know what? I'm living the life, and I don't care what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, if you are talking about, I mean, this bloke's got form when it comes to not caring about the things that he says where other people would not even dare to say it because, well, it's not that it crosses lines. It's just that it's thoughtless. It's clueless. It's there is a lack of appreciation of other people. And yeah, look, I get that the players can get absolutely hammered on social media relentlessly. We've backed players who have copped hammerings because it's not needed. You know, you get the trolls that are out there. Only they can know what they're going through. But if you're talking about setting yourself up as a target, like, words fail me for that particular one. it's why is his club not suggested to him that he get it down? Maybe they have. Maybe he's just said, no, I'm
He's
leaving
willful.
it up there.
Yeah, possibly.
So,
but yeah, it's like I said, the fake tough guy stuff too. The standing over DCE and not clearing the ruck, and his involvement in the brawl at the end. Yeah, it just speaks to a player that doesn't, who's almost there for the paycheck, I think. So,
how do players that do what is most obviously a headbutt escape with a fine?
Between that and how the Victor Radley headbutt was initially handed, I legitimately don't know what the NRL, where they stand on headbutts. So we got a send-off and a sin bin for the headbutts, but only fines in terms of what was handed out immediately afterwards. Victor Radley was allowed to play on that game after clearly having, it was more of a headbutt than the other two, honestly, but clearly headbutting there. I don't know. The NRL, once again, they whiffle waffle on like legitimately concerning things like this, then tell us it's not a crackdown on. There was a hip drop last night as well on Tedesco.
Yeah,
but we're not going to sin bin a state of origin. Like,
yeah. And what about
no
Cameron Smith's comments?
charge for the hip drop as well, by the way.
Yeah, but what about Cameron Smith's comments on the Reece Walsh tackle on Luai, where he's literally wrapped his arms around his neck and around Luai's neck and head, and rode him to the ground via his head, and then Cameron Smith goes, there's been, what did you say, about 20 of these in the game already, or whatever number he said. That's not a penalty. It's Origin football. What? When you've got the biggest audience that you will get through the season watching that, including kids, and look, I'm not being a wowser in this regard. You can't have the commentary was rank awful last night, just rank awful. But you can't have someone who's regarded as a complete legend of the game saying that tackling in that manner passes muster in Origin football because it's Origin football.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just can't. The message that it sends, and just going back to what happened with the headbutts, because I'm going to throw another criticism at Reece Walsh here, the way he carried on as he was sent off the field, like he's celebrating the fact that he's been sent off for a headbutt. Again, what message does that send? I tell you what, there are enough impressionable young minds that you could imagine a kid doing something stupid, being sent off the field and celebrating being sent off the field.
Yeah.
I'm
all for players layering it up when they get a big win the way Queensland did. If after the full-time whistle, the whole boys were really going over the top of their celebrations, no issues. But like you said, in the context of being dismissed that way, to arc up the crowd and layer it up sends some very mixed messages, doesn't it?
Oh, look, I have little doubt that he's in an emotional frenzy right at that point in time, because the match has suddenly had this big heated up moment right at the point where they're ready to celebrate not just a win in the match but a win in the series, and he's being sent off the field in that heat of the moment. And like, as I said, he's ready to celebrate. I get that the whatever part of the brain that it is that triggers emotional responses, it's not thinking logic right then and there at that point. But again, there has to be a consequence for it, because it's a chosen action, just like the headbutt is a chosen action. See, when you've got tackles that go wrong, when there's no intent for a head-eye tackle, or there's no intent for the grapple not a grapple tackle,
the crushes and whatnot,
the crusher tackle,
mm-hmm.
right? When those things happen accidentally, That's not an excuse. That's never accepted as an excuse. And yet the players aren't, in most instances, the last thing that they're trying to do is give away a penalty or hurt the opposition player in some way. But, they might have to cop a suspension. If you are going to headbutt someone, if you're looking to do such an action
in the era of concussion,
Yep. You are making deliberate contact into the face of the opponent, and for everything that might deliver, be it a concussion, a busted nose, a busted jaw, perhaps, any of those consequences that could happen, for that to just be a slap on the wrist is not good enough. It really isn't. So, anyway, mate, is there any final comments you want to make? Because I guess we should wrap this up.
I think we
get into our previews.
Yeah, well, the only question I suppose now is should the way NRL teams move on from coaches mid-season, should the Blues move on from Freddie Fittler for Game 3? And
I think my stance has always been with Origin. Whatever you go with in Game 1, you've got to go with through to Game 3. Like, I just think it's, if you've got to, unless someone proves that they are way out of their depth,
well,
or you've got your combinations completely wrong. Hang on, I'm ticking boxes here up.
But yeah, Fittler will see our game. Fittler will see our Game 3. But yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm not one for radical change. Like I didn't agree with some of the selections in Game 1 around the pairing of Cleary and Luai, and I just didn't. I didn't think that Luai was in Origin form.
Here's a tough one for you. Is Tom Tebojevic stamped never to play Origin again? Is he too big of a liability?
He would have to. It's not going to happen in this instance, right? But let's say, for example, it wasn't a serious injury and he was back playing within a week. Would you select him for Origin 3? No. In terms of future selections, he would literally have to come back next year at the start of the year, be in outstanding form for the entire year, show no signs of injury, and then I'd have continued.
I'd still be reticent, yeah. What we saw last night, that was one of the most nothing pec injuries I've ever seen. Like, usually a pec injury involves like a violent wrenching of the arm, right? Whether it's intentional or not. Sometimes, there was the whole armbar thing happening in the NRL at one point that led to him. In this case, he was just making a tackle and just rolled over the dude. Tommy, this isn't an attack on Tommy's talents. He's one of the most gifted players in the entire competition. But he's going to go down as the biggest what-if of this generation.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? He should not have been selected for the series this year. He'd been in extremely ordinary form for Manly when he played. He had one outstanding game, which was against Canberra. And next thing, he's catapulted into Origin with all the journos agreeing with his selection.
Yep.
And waxing lyrical about the reuniting the Origin team backline from a couple of years back. So it was like, rejoice. We get the chance to make all these selections. Never mind the fact that there are injury and form issues surrounding at least half of them. We like Addo-Carr, it's turned out to be okay in terms of his injury, but he'd been injured. You're talking about Tedesco, who'd been out of form. You're talking about Turbo, who'd been both injured and out of form. You're talking about Latrell Mitchell, who had been injured. It was like a recipe for disaster. And then you've got the selection of players who are great in club combinations, but haven't really produced consistently in Origin football, like Cleary and Luai. And, there's a bit of hindsight involved, but there's also, it was all highly predictable.
Yep.
And in the case of Tommy Turbo, it was like you couldn't make a case for his selection. How did he win selection just based on form? Just based on form alone. Even take out injury. Based on form alone, how did he win selection over Campbell Graham?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
good shout.
It's an absurdity. And you know what? If when it comes down to it, mate, I'd take Will Pensini into Origin ahead.
Well, isn't it funny how
Turbo.
club combinations suddenly unimportant when it doesn't feature the Penrith boys? Because Parramatta's right edge could have been pretty handy there. Madison, Penasini, likes those players. Like, I'm not saying you should have picked them, but the conversation turns rapidly from we need club combinations when it's the Penrith boys to we'll just get Mitchell Moses in there. So,
Yeah, well, we've got no bias in saying it is unfathomable how Turbo got selected ahead of Campbell Graham.
Yeah, agreed.
He's there had been nothing, like literally nothing, in Turbo's form at fullback this season to warrant selection. You don't get selection on one go. Well, yes, we know actually you do, because Talakai got selection from Fittler at centre on one enormous half of football, not a full game, one enormous half of football up against Morgan Harper from the Sea Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, one headline grabbing game can get you into Origin under Fittler's command. But yeah, and again, this isn't an attack on Tommy Turbo, because the last thing he would be wanting is another injury. And there's a part of me as well that might be thinking, like Latrell Mitchell withdrew himself from the team, said he wasn't fit, he wasn't ready to go. Would it have been in Tommy Turbo's best interest to stand himself down from Origin football this year? And I guess, like, he probably has that passion for New South Wales. I can get that. But, there's got to be a part in the brain where you go, is it in the team's best interest? Is it in my best interest? And you know what? I don't think there would have been a rugby league supporter out there if Tommy Turbo had have said, look, I haven't had a great run with injury. I'm going to declare myself unavailable for Origin selection this year. I need to get myself and my body in the best possible shape that I can. And if I can get back to playing consistent football for 12 months, I'll make myself available for Origin selection again.
Mm-hmm.
And could you imagine would there be a single person out there who would have been critical for him for such a call?
No.
I doubt it.
And you know what? There's always idiots, but outside of that, yes.
And you know what? The people who would have been cheering the most would have probably been Manly supporters.
Yeah, agreed. They're the ones that have been hurt the most by him playing Origin in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And, he's barely played a game for Manly relative to his monster contract. I think he's averaged like 11 or 12 games a year over the last 4 or 5 seasons. And when you look at his cap hit, like on a per game basis, they're paying him outrageous amounts of money. So,
yeah. Yeah, and that's like, I haven't gone and checked Manly socials, the supporter sites, the what is it, Silver Tails?
Yeah, that's their supporter forum. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't checked their supporter forum. I've got a sneaky feeling that there will be plenty there that would take that stance, that as a club, they just don't get. I mean, they love him as a player, but they also know they just don't get value out of him, as for the amount of coin that he takes up. It just isn't there. So Anyway, it's
Time to talk
no,
Parramatta, I think, mate.
yeah,
we've
I think it is time to
we've
talk
waffled
Parramatta.
we've waffled length that state of origin, and we'll do more for Origin 3, obviously. But for now, let's talk Parramatta Eels, and we're going to start as always when they're playing with the Jersey Flegg, who actually kick off a very frustrating week of scheduling 60s, a 12:30 p.m. kickoff out at PointsBet Stadium, aka Shark Park, naturally taking on the Cronulla Sharks in that fixture. Eels enter the round in 9th place, taking on the 3rd place Sharks. Only 4 wins, though, separating the two teams, which I know isn't an insignificant amount of victories, but it's also not a gaping difference. But Sharks, very good in this grade. Eels, really struggling at the moment. Had some tough results go against them. Getting some big reinforcements this week, though, as we go through the team list. Starting at fullback, Te Horonui Apanui Tweedle, or Upper Tweedle, back in his preferred position after spending a few weeks covering the halves. So he goes back to fullback, hopefully a big boost for the team there. You got Komalafi, Penasini, Blackburn, and Williams across the back line with Matthew and Taroa on the edges, Richard and Lachlan in the centres. Josh Lynn reunites with the big in, which is Ethan Sanders, who makes his return from a broken hand after 4 or 5 weeks out. And massive boost for the Eels there. The biggest one by far they could have gotten, but he's not the lone inclusion. In the front row, you've got Noah Reid and Brock Parker, with Nick Lenars getting a C next to his name this week, 60s. Good reward there for Nick, who's been fantastic this season. Back row, Charlie Geimer and Will Latu on the edges. Max Tupou's back, and he'll start at lock forward. On the interchange, Matthew Arthur is also back after serving his 2-game suspension, which is a nice in at dummy half. Sam Tuivasa, Saxon Pryke, and Lance Fulima round out an all SG Ball interchange. Patrick Spence goes back to the 18th man. It's a very good team on paper. Ethan Sanders is a huge in here for the Parramatta Eels. He'll obviously help steer the ship and let them be a lot more direct and fast and fluent in attack. But reality is, this is going to have to be a whole team effort, isn't it, to snap the losing streak and get back to playing some good football.
Yeah, absolutely true. I guess there's an element of unknown because the halfback position is so crucial that Ethan Sanders is such a huge in, and the fact that you're talking about a spine which guided the SG Ball to their competition victory. Twiddle, Josh Lynn, Ethan Sanders, and Matty Arthur coming off the interchange bench. And it's, that is a big team change this week. You're talking about players that understand each other's play. It's almost like second nature to them to read what's happening, be it attack or defence. Just getting the team organised is going to fall into their hands. Now, we're huge fans of Nick Lenaz. I would suggest there's a good chance that Nick will move to lock at some point during the game when Matt Arthur comes onto the field, so that he can continue leading the team. But yeah, just looking, the entire bench is the SG Ball, made up of SG Ball players: Arthur, Tuivasa, Saxon Pryke, Lance Fulima, and then the concussion reserve of Paddy Spence. It's, you start. It's starting to look like it's almost going to be close to the SG Ball team at some point in the near future.
Once Blaze telling he's back, exactly, that's another player slotting in. So, it's, obviously it speaks very well towards the talent pool in the SG Ball. But I suppose the other question too is, how long do the Flegg get to keep Ethan Sanders? It might not be that long.
Yeah, look, I would suspect that's going to be the case. It'd be interesting because you probably want Ethan up there playing New South Wales Cup. I don't know how much he's going to learn or develop as a player at the Flegg level when he has the capacity to play at the New South Wales Cup level. Yet there's some real floggings that the New South Wales Cup team are going through. do you want him subjected to that? Or could he make such a significant difference that doesn't happen, especially as the Eels start to get more players back from injury that then are coming back from the NRL into New South Wales Cup, and therefore you're going to get better performances anyway. I guess maybe that's something for Sanders and his agent Fieldsy to think about when they're talking to the Eels about what the plans are for the rest of the year around Ethan. Hopefully we get some news on what's happening with him from a contract perspective fairly soon. But for now, mate, I have to acknowledge that Cronulla are going well, but I'm also going to acknowledge that this Parramatta team might just have the capacity to bounce back this week and get an unexpected win in the Jersey Flegg. And that's what I'm going to tip in this game.
Nice. Yeah, I think, Ethan's inclusion is going to be very significant for the team. But yeah, just getting back to playing good football and the lapses. It's been, just a handful of lapses here or there in that run of losses that have really cost them. Kicking back to that Melbourne Storm game. But yeah, getting back to playing good team football, having the halves and the spine really steering the ship will be huge. And yeah, maybe they can engineer an upset on the weekend, which brings us to the New South Wales Cup. And this one really frustrates me, 60s, because having a free cock kickoff clashing with the free cock kickoff in the NRL was just so silly.
Mate, you know what? I'm going to look forward to some weeks where we can maybe get out and cover some of the lower grade football for Parramatta, because in terms of what we've been able to do with live blogs in the last month or two, it's really felt minimal because the scheduling has been diabolical, absolutely diabolical. And people who follow TCT know that we pride ourselves on being able to provide them with the coverage that they don't get elsewhere. But not only do we pride ourselves on that, we enjoy being able to go out there and look at the progress of the players coming through the lower grades at the Eels. So, this is, again, another example of the scheduling just not being conducive to being able to get out there and support. You can imagine from the club's perspective, they've got players running around and staff running around involved in these lower grade matches that would much rather be able to be at the same ground as the NRL and supporting them, or at least being able to watch them live. So, not ideal.
Lamentable indeed, my good friend. But let's get into the team list now as the Eels look to bounce back from consecutive drubbings. The Canterbury Bulldogs and before the Manly Seagulls, or the Blacktown Workers Eagles, Canterbury, and then Manly dusting up the Eels in the last couple of weeks. And to do that, they've got some reinforcement 60s. Finally, it feels like they've gotten some important ins across the forwards and the backs. We start, as always, at fullback. We start with where this game is being played, I suppose, 3 o'clock p.m. at Henson Park. So the home of the Jets there, who have been linked to Perth today, I believe. Looking to make some moves there, maybe. But yeah, at fullback here, the big one, the one I'm really keen to see, Arthur Miller-Stephen back 60s. We were talking about him just last week, saying that the timeline sort of really lines up here, or last week with him coming back, and obviously they took just the extra week there to get him healthy. He comes back at fullback, huge in for the team there. And just the inclusion of him and the fact that Wonga Blake isn't injured when he missed that second half last week against the Manly Seagulls, or Blacktown Workers Eagles, means that the backline suddenly actually looks somewhat competent. Miller-Stephen at fullback, Isaac Lumi goes from centre to wing, which is his better position, with Hayes Dunster on the right flank, Lumi on the left, Wonga Blake at centre, and Zach Sini going from fullback to centre. So suddenly it actually looks like a pretty reasonable backline for the reserve grade. In the halves, Dan Keir has still been tasked with a pretty tough challenge there. He's going to be 5'8" for Jordan Rankin, who's captains at halfback. In the front row, you got the big hyphen, Jonte Jr., Betham Meeser. He'll partner Kai Rodwell as the bookends. Manny Luke is the dummy half. In the back row, a couple of guys dropping back from NRL. Desperately unlucky, it has to be said. But we always knew there was going to be some tough calls for Brad Arthur as guys got healthy. But I feel for Matt Doorey and Luca Moretti, both of whom have been very good in NRL across the last 3 or 4 weeks. But they'll be in the back row with Jack Murchie, Moretti locks the scrum. Murchie and Doorey on the edges. Now, in terms of who plays what side, that's going to be a good shout because I think, well, even though Doorey plays right edge most of the time in the NRL, well, he started the season the right edge. I think in reserve grade he's been playing left edge, and Murchie was a right edge back row last week, I think. So that'll probably play out that way. It's a young interchange. Jock Brazel, Tony Mattelli leading the way there. Jeremiah Sia and Nico Apello bringing a bit more age there, not necessarily experience, but for Apello being not necessarily a highly graded or highly experienced New South Wales Cup player. But yeah, it's a much better roster this week, 60s, and goodness, it's timely because the Jets, they're formidable. Connor Tracy at fullback. We got big raps on Kyle Iro and Samuel Stonestreet. They're in that back line there alongside Josh Mansour and Mawene Hiroti, who are very experienced NRL players. Trindle's at halfback. Niwai Puru's got some good raps on him as a halfback. So you got those two in the halves. Then in the front, the forward pack actually is a little bit less, at least in terms of name power, a little bit less popping off the screen, but they've still got Charbel Tassapali and Billy Magoulias. So it's a very good team. And last time these teams met in round 2, it was the first thrashing that the Eels got in this grade this year, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and the last thing you want, if you're already coming off a run of drubbings, which extends back to the game against Newcastle.
Yes, well, they'll beat them very comfortably, yeah. Yeah,
and you'd have to suggest that confidence would be low. The spirit, I'm not sure how high the spirits are within the team when we were watching last week, watching them come off at halftime with already a lopsided score, a horribly lopsided score. I think it was it up, getting up close to 40?
36-4, I think it was, or something like that. 34-4, I think.
Yeah, and I think the week before it was 40-0 or something like that at half time.
Yes, it was.
Or whatever it was. But yeah, I watched them, and I watched the body language as they came off the field, and it was, and I think it was the same at full time, but there really wasn't much unity as they walked off. Like, it seemed like everyone was straggling, getting off the field. And going back to the sheds, and it didn't fill a person with confidence for where their minds were at, and maybe there will be a resurgence in that with the team that they're able to field this week. As you said, a big test. Like you just, after you come off those drubbings, the last thing you want to face is the Newtown Jets with their high standard of football, with blokes running around that might be at another club playing first grade, especially their backs. Stone Street absolutely massacred us last time we played against. Anytime the ball got to him, he just seemed to get around his opposite with ease, and then no one could get near him. Such was his pace. But look, I think I don't want to expect too much of Artie at fullback. This is his first week back.
Yeah, he's getting pushed. I mean, we spoke about what the plan was with young Ethan Sanders, and I know that Arthur's a little bit older. But yeah, it's a difference there in the burden of expectation, isn't it? Where you get the chance to come back and Flegg and build yourself up from an injury, versus you're going straight from the frying pan into the fire here.
Yeah, so it's not ideal. I can't tip a win for the New South Wales Cup this week.
No, if you're being anywhere near realistic, if they can keep the score close, they've done a great job.
Yeah, what I'm looking for from them this week is simply an improved performance. I want to see that they've got the slightest semblance of a bit more positivity in their mindset, because it evaporated very quickly in the last couple of weeks.
And they scored the first try last week as well, so it wasn't like they had a bad start. But
as soon as the tide turned, it really turned.
Yes.
You know, like the heads went down, and then it was almost a matter of kick-off, score.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the tries just came in rapid fashion in the look, because when you think, I think it might have taken, I can't remember whether Blacktown's first try was after 10 or 15 minutes last week, but the tries came thick and fast in very soon after that. So it tends to be that when this team is down in the dumps like that, when they concede tries, they concede them rapidly. And it's not back to back; it's back to back to back to back. It seems with their defence conceding tries. So, yeah, let's look for an improved performance, a bit more positivity out there. Look, I think Jaden Yates would be getting close to returning as well. I spoke to him the other week, and he said he was still another couple of weeks out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was 2 weeks ago. So he must be close to getting back to getting on the field as well. And look, he would have been an option in the halves.
Yes, I think it would have been less disruptive to the team to have Yates there, who has a bit more history playing in the halves and can be, you know, the sort of the link guy pretty cleanly. So yeah, poor Dan Keir getting thrust into a very difficult decision or position, and it's much less It's funny because I know we just roasted Freddie Fittler for doing something similar to Damien Cook, but the Eels are obviously down on resources much more significantly when it comes to the playmaking stocks. And yeah, this is one of those necessary evils right now, as opposed to
a quick question for you. Did you notice Jacob Davis get injured last week?
No, I was actually going to mention that one absentee from both team lists was Jacob Davis, who I thought played a pretty good game in a well-beaten team. I thought the young guys actually stood up. Jonte, Tony, Jacob, Jock. I thought they all played pretty good football. But yeah, I did not see an obvious injury, so I don't know if it was injury or suspension, but by the same token, I don't think he did anything warranting suspension. So
yeah, no, I couldn't recall an injury. I couldn't recall an incident.
And that's a real shame because he played a good brand of football, came in, was up tempo from dummy half, had some nice runs, nearly scored a try at one point. Yeah, so real shame that he got nicked up from this one, presumably.
Yeah, so, but mate, you're the same as me then. Being realistic, a bit too tough to predict an Eels victory in this. Yeah, so for me, a good result is 1-12 loss.
Yeah, very much so.
And I don't want to think outside of that. So,
bringing us to the main event as the Eels look to make it 5 in a row in the NRL. This is the 8th placed Eels taking on the 10th placed Dolphins. 7 wins, 7 losses for the Dolphins with 2 byes. Eels 8 wins, 7 losses. So have finally moved that needle into the positive side 60s. They've got it on the right side of the winning percentage there. And the Eels actually not that far off. It's high as second place on the ladder, honestly. With boasting the second best points differential in the competition. It has been a very weird year. Like, just looking at these numbers here, I know we've talked about it at length about how the Eels have managed their losses in a way that has kept them highly competitive in points differential, but just seeing this ladder is crazy. But yeah, they're taking...
I think it goes without saying that at this time of year, the fate of every team is pretty much in their own hands.
Yep.
But I think what we'd be getting at in saying that with the Eels is a place high up in the top 8 is in the Eels' hands here. If they can continue the run, then it is very likely that they can get themselves into the top 4 and, as you suggested, maybe even the top 2, which would be the best case scenario and probably one that...
Yeah, home field advantage for the finals.
After 5 rounds, most people would have thought it would have been absurd to suggest that could happen. But as the way that the competition is this year, it is a possibility that that it could happen. But of course, they have to keep the roll on. It's a critical week playing away from home against the Dolphins. They've had their own challenges in more recent weeks, but they have a pretty strong looking lineup that you'll run through in just a moment. If the Eels can get the win, it's one of those 4-point wins because they follow on the following week with the bye. So over to you, mate, for the team lists.
Yeah, so we'll start with our opposition as we go up to, Redcliffe, I suppose, but 3 o'clock p.m. kickoff out at, what's it called there? Sunshine Coast Stadiums. I know fancy sponsoring on this one here. They're taking on probably the pluckiest, most impressive story of the season in the Redcliffe. Well, they're not the Redcliffe, but the Dolphins, sorry, with Wayne Bennett steering his team to a legitimately competitive spot on the ladder and a push for the finals. And they've got a few Origin players backing up here, it looks like, so at least one. They start with Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow, who will back up from playing centre at Origin to play fullback against the Eels. On the wings, they've got Jermaine Asako and rookie Braden McGrady. In the centres, Ewan Aiken and Valence Tafare. In the halves, Cody Nikarima and young gun Isaiah Katoa partner up. And then you go to the forwards, where Captain Jesse Bromwich will lead the scrum with Herman S.A. Jeremy Marshall-King has been named 60s. There was a bit of a cloud about his fitness, though, so we'll have to monitor that one. In the back row, you've got Felice Gafusi with Kenneth Bromwich on the edges. Former Eel and a beloved former Eel, really, Talis Manick in his efforts for the club. Ray Stone will start at lock forward. With Josh Kerr, the new player at the club after getting released from the Dragons. He's on the interchange with Mark Nichols, Connolly Lamelu, and Max Plaff. The extended interchange or the shadow bench, Harrison Graham, Sean O'Sullivan, Pawasa Farmasuli, Robert Jennings, and Kurt Donegal. Donegal? I'm sorry, Kurt. With the Dolphins still missing quite a few players due to injury, but that roster, honestly, I mean, on paper at the start of the season, I would have said it's not that great, but looking at it now, there's guys that are contributing across the 1 to 13 as well as the interchange.
Yeah, where are they at as a team? Certainly earlier this year, they were playing out of their skins. Like they absolutely were. They exceeded my expectations early on. I'd predicted them to finish with the spoon or very close to the spoon. Their early season form looked like they could push for the top 8. They're still there or thereabouts, but they've certainly hit the wall with some recent results. They've had some scores put on them. They've had some injuries that have been rather unfortunate for them. But I guess you look at them and you go, they're the sort of team that you don't want to give them a sniff of a victory. You don't want them to be in a position where like a bounce of the ball or a freak play could get them across the line, because they've got 1 or 2 players there who could pull something out of the bag. And that's, of course, headed by the likes of the Hammer and Jermaine Asako.
Asako sort of rebuilt his career at the Dolphins, looking like a very good NRL player again. And I know that a lot of people were cheering on Valence Tavare, who had that explosive debut at Magic Round. So they've got some strike in the back line. They've got some real good workers in the forward pack. JMK, if he is healthy, is a bit of a live wire attacking threat at a dummy half.
Yeah, he was underrated for so long, Jeremy Marshall-King, and I didn't quite understand the low value that the Bulldogs put on him, because to me, he was always one of their major attacking threats. And they opted to go for Reid Marnie, who's, probably more of the, if we can put it this way, the workhorse type of dummy half, instead of someone who's got those flashes of creativity like Jeremy Marshall-King. So I guess the expectation around what's going to happen is maybe not too dissimilar to how we lined up against Manly, in that, Manly, even with a couple of their players out, just as we had a couple of our key players out, had those strike players within the team, be it on the edges and with Hamoli Olakauatu and also just the sheer pace of Jason Saab. So if you remember last week, I was saying that my main concern was a trick shot or two that might get the Eagles into a position of winning the game. And, of course, Parramatta strangled them out of it. So I want to see more of the same this week.
Mm-hmm. And for the Eels
from Parramatta, and I know that the return of Mitch Moses provides that little bit more strike power and direction in the spine, but I liked the focus that our players had last week. Just that commitment to be relentless, not overplaying their hand. There might have been a couple of shifts wide out to Micah that happened a little bit too quickly in terms of the feed onto him through Bailey Simonson. There was probably one instance there where I thought Bailey probably should have gone on his own rather than giving Micah the early ball.
Yeah,
but he learned quickly from that because he ended up scoring in a fairly similar scenario soon after it, where he was like, no, I'm putting the foot down myself here and scoring. But if the Eels approach the game in a fairly similar manner to last week, there's no reason why it can't be a fairly similar result. Is the pack for the Dolphins any better than the Manly pack were on paper last week?
No. And the way the Eels line up this week, and I'll get to that shortly, means that they should be able to carry on to business, like you said, as long as they're getting their own way. And for the Eels, they look like this 60s. Not too many changes, just the Origin guys mostly backing up this week. But Quinton Gufferson at fullback, as always. Unchanged backline, Mike Acevo, Sean Russell on the edges. Will Penasini, Bailey Simonson in the centres. Dejan Arce slots from halfback back to 5'8", with Mitchell Moses coming back into the team, which means Ryan Madison has a different role this week. Big fella did a good job at 5'8", but I'm sure he'll be much happier to get back to his back row sort of preferred position. In the front row, Reagan Campbell-Gillard and Junior Barlow will partner with Brendan Hands, who again will be tasked with playing 80 minutes in the absence of Josh Hodgson. Hodjo obviously just taking up that mutual option with the club as well for next year, but he's still pushing through that neck injury, which we know neck injuries are a real bugger. So hopefully he gets healthy sooner rather than later. In the back row, Bryce Cartwright and Andrew Davey will start. So Maddo goes to the interchange, not to the starting edge position, with Jermaine Hopgood at lock forward. On the interchange, we mentioned it with Quinton, that NRL podcast, but it's a big, beefy bench. Ogden, Opengahi, Madison and Makatoa, 4 big forwards there with the rotation. And then the extended roster, Hayes Dunster, Matt Doorey, Luca Moretti, Wanga Blake and Sean Lane. Match officials are Peter Goff. Wyatt Raymond is the only touch judge listed, so he's going to have a lot of work to do on the weekend, with Matt Noyen, the senior review official. So it looks like the Eels got the C team on Saturday. Most of those guys aren't anywhere near the top billed officials. And maybe that's a good thing, 60s, given some of the opinions we have on the top officials in the NRL here. But yeah, Eels looking very, very formidable in this roster. I think we're missing, Hodgson, Lane. Who else is there right now that comes in and makes and bumps
Dylan Brown.
Dylan Brown, sorry. Congrats to Dejan. He's done such a good job that I'm not even thinking about Dillbags. But yeah, so Dylan, obviously we're going to monitor from that bye week when he has his second court appearance. But credit to Dejan, 60s. He has done a very, very good job working not just in relief of Dylan, but also Mitchell Moses.
Yeah, it's when you've seen the left side play, which he's been mostly responsible for, it seems to have functioned pretty much like clockwork. And as I said, the only issues that they had was really around shifting to Sevo a little bit too early last week. But apart from that, you saw when they went to the left to attack, there was good shape there. And the players knew exactly what was going on. And that's going through Dejan to Gutho in a lot of those plays. But Dejan delivered good ball for Gutho or whoever was outside him. Can't knock him with that. He doesn't have the boot of Mitch Moses, but Moses is back in this week. So he's at least comparable to Dylan Brown's kicking game. Dylan doesn't have a long kicking game. He's more the the shorter kicking game. And I guess that's where Dejan fits in his longer kicks. He really doesn't want to be too much over his own side of halfway when he's kicking. And that's why I'm saying that I think if the Eels can focus on getting that good field position like the way that they did last week and keeping their composure, keeping patience, playing with real maturity as they did last week, then that really sets the platform for what should be a victory over the Dolphins. I'm just hoping that they play that Parramatta football, and which, as we know, the BA emphasises all the time: chase a bit of the collision, win the middle of the ruck. He doesn't like the team dipping the toe in the water, as he calls it, and as we've mentioned before, he wants them to be, straight into embracing. As he talked about last week, he talked about how they embrace the defence that they need to do, and over the last, I mentioned this in the column today, that over the last 4 weeks, the Eels have only averaged, have only conceded on average 12 points per game. And for those who might go, well, you know what? That's because they've just had 4 wins. Well, if we extend it to the last 10 games, they're averaging, they're conceding an average of 16 points per game. Now, that's going to get you, the 12 points a game is equivalent to what Penrith are able to produce week in, week out. They only concede that amount of points across the season. The 16 points per game would have you at the second best defence in the competition. And I think in reality, there's even though there are more missed tackles than BA would like, the scramble and the systems are working quite well. And while ever the scramble and the systems are working quite well, you have to give acknowledgement to the work that they're doing in defence.
And that's what we spoke about early in the season, where the systems were working, but the players weren't necessarily executing the tackles perfectly. And that's where we're having those big, busts and sort of tries being leaked. And now they've fine-tuned that, which is what you do in the season, right? You fine-tune and you constantly tinker and work. Yeah, the systems and the players look really, really good in defence.
And what you have to remember as well is there were some newer combinations out there. Jermaine Hopgood, new to the team, and he's one who leads that line speed, but he's not familiar with the players around him. He's more familiar now. You also had Josh Hodgson, new to the team,
coming off trying to get back to full fitness too.
Yeah, coming back from that, and he did not have the best start to the season, but prior to his recent out now with the neck injury,
it was a month of really good football.
It was, and where he was being credited with 5.5 to 6 missed tackles per game. In the previous weeks, he was down to maybe 2 or 3. So his average missed tackles across the season had reduced to less than 5. Hopgood himself was sitting at around 5 missed tackles per game. But, and as I said, I honestly think it's not something that is unexpected to have players who are new to the team and new to the systems be the ones that take a little bit longer to adjust.
Yeah.
And, they were really the two players that when you looked at the stats, their missed tackle count was way higher than the rest of the team. Whereas now those sorts of numbers have pulled right back. And like I know that there are people who take that stance of, look, when Hodgson's on the field versus when Brendan Hands is on the field, you know what? Let's just give let's just give Brendan Hands credit for how he's playing without, pointing a negative at Josh Hodgson there, because they are two very different types of dummy half. Hodgson's more of the schemer, whereas Brendan Hands is more of the running dummy half, if we're talking about what they do in attack. Apart from that, both of them are expected to provide good service for the halves. And what can you say about the Eels' service to the halves at the moment if you've got the team that's sitting with the second best attack in the competition?
Yeah, and the other consideration here too, 60s, is Brendan Hands is doing a tremendous job in his rookie season, but how often do you see a rookie burn out if you have to lean on him for 80 minutes every week, especially to role as critical as dummy half? So having that battery there at dummy half will be good for the Eels in the long term. And yeah, I expect Brendan to do a great job again this weekend. He's been ultra reliable and caught him to 80, and I think he would be for weeks to go. But at 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, there will be a barrier if he has to keep playing 80 minutes. So getting Hodgson back fit, I think, is going to be key for this team.
Yeah, what we know is that right now, Brendan Hands is at the embryonic stage of his career. Literally, his NRL career is just starting. It's however many games he's up to now with the Eels is the extent of his NRL career. So he's only going to get better. But as you said, because he's at that level of inexperience, there will be hurdles that he will have to face, because every player faces them in their career. And as you said, having that older head there in the team with him is only going to benefit him. And that's why I don't think you need to have an either or scenario with the Eels in this regard. What BA has to look at doing is to get the minutes right.
Yes, exactly. And I know earlier in the season, I'm pretty certain I said in the podcast, I don't know if it was Instant Reaction or Live, that Brendan Hands probably won't feature in the Dally M race for Rookie of the Year. But I was looking at the field, and he's probably going to be, the fact that he has just continued to play at such a strong level, and he's not posting gaudy stats. He hasn't got 8 tries at dummy half or whatever, but he's doing such a fundamentally strong job for the Eels. The field probably comes down to Katoa from the Dolphins, who we play this week. Carla Wapu might get some points as the young gun at the Canterbury team. Jonah Pezzett won't play enough at Melbourne. He might actually feature more than I thought. So, there's a bit of silverware on the line for him if he keeps playing good football.
Mate, I see this as either a topic for the podcast or maybe a 40-20 special.
Yeah, do a bit of a deep dive into the competition. We'll have to wait and see for that one, yeah. But on the Parramatta Eels 60s, the team is really strong on paper. The team is really strong on form. They're looking for 5 in a row, heading into a bye. The Dolphins are coming off a bye. The Eels have played plenty of teams coming off byes this year. What does it mean for the team to get 5 in a row going into the week off? Like how does that position them for that tough run in the back sort of third of the season?
Well, right now, you're talking about, it's not just a win of 5 in a row. It's a run of 14 premiership points when you throw in the 2 byes that have come in this period. So you've seen this climb up the ladder, and it's a building of momentum. And with that building of momentum comes a building in confidence. Now, I was at training on Tuesday, and there was no shortage of positivity around the group. I mean, they were literally jumping out of their skins at train. Now, it's not that there'd been any negativity around the joint prior to that, but, winning is far better than the alternative when it comes to the mindset of players. And, when you get that belief that you're going to win when you step out on the field. And look, I think that the Eels have approached this season in pretty much that way, that they've had a belief that they were going to win when in every match when they stepped out onto the field.
Yep.
The fact that it didn't happen didn't seem to jar their resolve too much. And if you remember, we had a conversation with Buckets a number of weeks back, and he was talking about the mindset of the players, and that they were pretty confident about where the season was going to take them, and this is when things weren't going entirely well. But the other thing too is, as things stand right now, the Eels have won 7 of their last 10. If they win this, of course, that becomes 8 of their last 11. 8 of the last 11 plus 2 buys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good run of points in the middle of the season, and where it would be good, and this might be a change from other seasons where we've seen the Eels fly out of the gates with the premiership table points, but then have a bit of a lull in form, whereas this year it's been reasonably consistent form where it's been slowly building in terms of their capacity to engineer a win. And, I think a win here is critical in keeping that roll on.
Mm-hmm.
And getting it away from home as well is exactly what I want to have going into that bye. And, and I'm sure that message is out there about how important it is for them. So,
and a win on Saturday, I believe, would tie the Eels for career best win streaks for Brad Arthur, which we had both in 2020 and 2021, if I'm not mistaken. The start of the 2020 season, and then the rounds 6 to 10 in 2021. So chance to equal that, and then hopefully better it once we come out of the bye. So plenty. I mean, we know that the Dolphins aren't going to make this easy. They've been, being scrappy at times, but highly competitive. And, you always know that a Wayne Bennett coach team is going to give you a real contest. But, yeah, Eels go out there and execute. I think that this is a game they can win and win well.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the capacity is at the Sunshine Coast Stadium, because this is one of those games where they're taking it. It's around the 10,000 mark. So this is a game that they're taking away from their home ground at Redcliffe. They're taking it to the Sunshine Coast. It's one of those grounds that the Queensland government has looked to boost and will be boosting further with the Olympic Games in 2032. So
yep.
It is apparently already sold out for this match. I know we have some TCT followers who will be attending the game. Some of our Queensland followers had some messages about that. So any of you that are listening now that are from up in Queensland, thank you for the messages. And I'm sure you'll get out there and make plenty of noise for the Eels. We know we've got a great support base for the team up in Queensland. It's one where it's not unusual to hear the Parra chant.
Breaking news. I'm pretty certain Justin Holbrook's just been sacked.
Wow.
Des Hasler has been appointed coach of the Titans.
Wow.
What? Okay, well, we'll jump into that with Quint in the news podcast, but yeah, that's going to be a hell of a breaking story to follow. Yeah, wow.
So you're hearing another example of our instant reaction with the news coming in.
Oh my goodness!
Right as we're about to wrap up our preview.
I feel like we are like this incredible catalyst for NRL news. We always record and then immediately something happens. And in this case, we happened because you had to go out and do an errand mid-recording. We had to pause. You actually managed to get us on time for the breaking news this time, 60s.
Yeah. Look, it's in one sense, it's not a surprise that they've had a change of coach. I thought it might happen at the end of the season, to be fair.
Yes,
with the Dolphins.
I agree. But there was credit to the
the Titans.
Credit to the Titans. Usually there's like rumor mongering and rumination and like all these whispers. And like you said, I could see at the end of the season moving on from Holbrook, who just hasn't been able to take them to the next level. But this one was like from the clouds, absolute thunderclap. So they've run it tight there, and I suppose Des comes in immediately, and now we might have another suitor for Josh Schuster's services.
Yes, it could be. It's have we ended up with the two coaches most likely to be moved on this season now moving on?
Yeah, I think that's probably, we had the Dragons obviously parting ways. Now we have the Titans parting ways. The West Tigers,
just O'Brien, isn't it?
Newcastle would be the other big one. Because I know that the West Tigers aren't going to move on from Sheens, because that's literally their plan, is to go Sheens to Benji. And yes, Cameron Serrato is under a bit of pressure in his rookie season, but it's his rookie season, so not moving on from him. Todd Payton was under a bit of pressure, but the Cowboys are starting to come good. They're the obvious coaching replacements, aren't they? So, and I suppose the other one now is Trent Robinson, but there's no way the Roosters move on from him this year.
No, he's got too much of a track record at the club. He's very respected there, and I just get the feeling that if they decided to change paths with Trent Robinson, that it wouldn't be a mid-season departure. No. I just wouldn't see that nowadays with the Roosters. So, but there we go.
Things happening with the tip sheet. Let's get back to Parramatta. Let's get our predictions on the line here, mate. We've talked a lot with a lot of different things, but Eels v Dolphins. How do you see this one playing out?
As I said, I think last week was really the blueprint for attitude and sticking to game plan. Just a real mature performance. I expect to see more of the same, with just maybe a little bit more Mitch Moses influence on the game in terms of being able to bust the defence open a little bit more. Comfortable. I'm going to tip a comfortable win for the Eels here, 36-14.
Yeah, not too dissimilar to the prediction I made with I didn't was on the podcast last night, but with the other boys on the Parra podcast. I think I said 32-14 for the Eels, so another pretty good margin of victory there. We had Andrew Davey for first try scorer in that one. Just feeling maybe the left edge, but not going all the way out to Micah this time. And I'm gonna. I thought it was
last week I boasted about tipping Jermaine Hopgood to score a try.
Anytime try scorer into the Parra win, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Odds are $7 there, but first try scorer, it's that's always the difficult punt, isn't it? Like it's far easier to go an anytime try scorer.
Yes, yeah.
But first up try scorer with this. Let's go Mitch Moses.
I like it.
Out of Origin. Yeah.
And I'm actually keen to see whether they give Mitch the full 80 here, or they might do a bit of a minutes restriction if we get ahead, and then slot Matto back into the halves, Varsi playing halfback in a chance to maybe rest him, because Mitch, I saw the run tracker, he was like top 5 in that game, and after that I felt like he was doing even more off the ball stuff. So a lot of football to be played for him. Best on field. I mean, I could definitely see Mitch backing up into a big game here. But again, it always feels like cheating when you pick a player like Guffo or Mitch, even though they're consistently some of our best players. The player, I think they'll have a big game here. Maybe a big game for Bryce Cartwright. Maybe. I think Davey, FTS, Cardi of the big game. But then again,
Cardi, you're liking the edges.
I am liking the edges. I'm feeling something for the back rowers this week, boys.
Well, I'm gonna. When you're on a good thing, stick to it. So I'm going to predict Jermaine Hopgood to have a cracking game in this one. He got my 3 points last week.
He was outstanding.
In a match where for some reason, I couldn't find points for Clint Gutherson, my mate Clint. It felt wrong that, and we talked about it in the news podcast, that he it wasn't so much that he slipped through, because I even put the vote out there to the the punters in the club. They got to vote with their cheers for who they'd give the player of the match to, and I think by popular opinion as well, it was Jermaine Hopgood and a couple of other players rather than the King. So, but there's no doubting that he keeps those standards very, very high. But I'm gonna stick with Jermaine Hopgood, future captain of the Eels and future premiership winner with the Eels.
There you go. There you go. He has had an outstanding start to his career as a Parramatta Eel, and you know, credit to the club and him for coming together for an agreement to help extend his first stay with the club, because he's going to be a huge building block for the Eels. Very, very good player.
Well, mate, I think we've just about wrapped up what has been a bigger preview podcast.
A Bonza Origin 2 review, breaking news of the Gold Coast Titans. We've had a bit of everything on a Parramatta preview podcast, but that's how it goes with the NRL. But yeah, fun times as always. Hope you guys enjoyed the listen. 60s, I'll let you sign off, big fella.
Go you Eels.